All right, let's get to the next subject. Let's look at Kendall Marshall. He broke his wrist. How's that going to affect Carolina's tournament play for the rest of the tournament?
I think it can go one of two ways. Obviously, it can be really good for the other teams, but it's most likely really going to inhibit the Tar Heels because obviously he is kind of that driving force behind them in terms of facilitating the ball. Now, granted, he's not that big scorer guy that everybody loves to associate UNC with, but he is the guy that jumpstarts that offense, gets them running in transition, and Coach Williams said today that the team is preparing 100% to play without him. So they're already thinking that they're not going to have him. Now, granted, they did say he may play, but if I'm Coach Williams, I don't even know if I'd try to play him because a lot of times that's just going to hurt your team with the turnovers. Just with that wrist, you don't want to risk that.
Logan, what do you think?
Kendall Marshall, I honestly believe that he's going to play. His Twitter account, he's in good spirits on his Twitter account. He tweeted, out of surgery, I'm screwed, because he got the screw in his thumb. So he's in very good spirits. And his father, they interviewed his father, and his father said that they would do whatever was best for Kendall's future. And so I think if it's just a question of pain, he's a tough kid. He plays a lot of minutes for him. If it's just a question of pain, he'll be playing. If there's a chance of, long-term injury, he'd be a fool to play because he definitely has an NBA payday ahead of him. But if he doesn't play, there's been a lot of talk about Stillman White, the Heels' backup point guard, who has performed decent and, if not spectacular. And then there's been a lot of talk also about Justin Watts. But I think that the Heels' best chance is just to go big and put one of their bigger wing players on the point and bring the ball down the floor, which one thing about not having Kendall Marshall is you immediately become better defensively because Kendall Marshall is a defensive liability. As good of a point guard as he is, he's probably in the lower half of point guards in Division I speed-wise. He's slower than molasses in the wintertime. It's awful. So I think the Heels' best opportunity is not to put in a backup point guard, but just to go 3 wing players who can score and just come right at you.
Well, some things just to touch on what you've said. Obviously, yes, he's not a speed demon, but he does get the ball up the floor particularly fast in Carolina's offense, liking to run. Getting the ball up, passing is just as effective as bringing it up yourself. Obviously, him compared to Ty Lawson, it's a different story. They're different point guards, but yet they're still effective in the fast break. I think he's going to play. I think it's going to be similar to Rondo in last year's NBA playoffs, where Rondo hurt his elbow and ended up playing. Kind of was one-dimensional with one hand. That's probably going to be what's going on with Kendall Marshall. Luckily, it was his right wrist that he broke, and not his shooting wrist. He's left-handed, so that's definitely going to help the Tar Heels in the rest of the tournament. I think that he's going to continue to play. With that being said, who's your favorite so far in the tournament, and who's your surprise team so far?
My favorite right now is still the Baylor Bears. I still think they have a beautiful chance to win. They're set up just right with their bracket. It's all going to come down to if they can execute as we've seen them execute all season. They dropped a couple close ones, but I still think that they've got what it takes with Missouri out and Duke out already. I mean, that takes 2 teams out right there that you don't have to worry about anymore. But my surprise team is NC State. They're on a roll right now. I mean, they've got 2 guys in in C.J. Leslie and Lorenzo Brown,
right?
Who both Leslie averages 14.6 points a game and 7.4 rebounds. Brown then averages 12.8 points and 6.4 assists. That's 2 guys right there. And on their stat sheet, they've got 7 guys that have played in at least every game, give or take 1 or 2. So once you take that, Kansas is their next opponent. It's just the number 2 seed.
Right.
If they can get past Kansas, they've got a very good shot of getting in because after Kansas, it's probably going to be UNC, and with Kendall Marshall out, and they've played UNC 3 times this year, lost every time.
Right.
You don't lose a 4th time if you're NC State. You just don't let it
happen. NC State has slowly played better in each game against Carolina. Leslie is definitely one of the better athletes in the ACC. He's a very good defensive player. Great athlete, like I said. So is Lorenzo Brown at the point. He's a big point guard. He's more of a shooting guard, really. But he's bringing the ball up for him the whole year. Played very well at the point, and he's considered the second best point guard in the ACC behind Kendall Marshall, but I think he's probably a better pro prospect, maybe as an athlete-wise.
And I've always said it's not the best team that goes in that you pick to win.
Right.
It's the teams that come in playing hot. That's why you saw everybody picking Florida State.
Right.
If you would have came up to me at the beginning there and told me Florida State was going to have any shot, I would have told you you're crazy. But they got on a streak, and they were playing hot when they came into the tournament. Granted, they did end up losing a heartbreaker, but I had them picked in my Final Four because they were playing so hot.
Right. What do you think?
All right, I think your favorite has to be Kentucky now, because Kentucky, when Kentucky is playing to their full potential, the only team in the country that could beat them was a fully stocked North Carolina team. They're the only team big enough to play with them, the only team athletic enough to run with them. They're the only team that had the right matchups. So a Carolina with a questionable or less than stellar Kendall Marshall is they're a challenge to Kentucky, but when Kentucky's playing well, we'll beat them. UNC was the only team who could beat Kentucky now.
Well, they played Kentucky earlier this year. In the
Right.
beginning of the season, Kentucky played Carolina. Carolina was fully healthy at the time, and Kentucky ended up winning the game. I think it was a home game for Kentucky, so that
Right,
does
it
help
was a
them.
home game. It was on a North Carolina had a shot at the end, and a big block at the end prevented
I
Carolina
think that
from getting a
helps.
shot off.
I think that helps the young Wildcats, though. I mean, obviously
absolutely.
they're stacked with freshmen, but they already know that they can beat Carolina because they've beaten
Right.
Carolina, even though Carolina did have the experience in that
I
ball
definitely
game.
think that Kentucky's the favorite to win, and I probably would have picked them as the favorite with Carolina fully stocked, but they definitely have to be the favorite now because I think Carolina is the only team in the country who could play with Kentucky playing well. And as for a surprise, not a huge surprise because they're a number 2 seed, but Kansas, because North Carolina's injury to Kendall Marshall, that in my mind makes Kansas the favorite to come out of that bracket. So if Kansas can upset North Carolina, then all of a sudden they're in the Final Four, or maybe even Ohio. So, and I don't think Kansas is going to have much trouble with NC State. And in my opinion, Kansas should have the National Player of the Year down low in Thomas Robinson. And Tyshawn Taylor's finally been living up to his potential. So I really think that North Carolina will go down to Kansas without Kendall Marshall, and they will meet Kentucky in the national championship, and Kentucky will beat Kansas for the national championship.
That's your pick?
If Kendall Marshall doesn't play.
Okay. Let's jump ahead. Derek Fisher is no longer with the Lakers. He got released. Where do you think he's going?
Well, obviously he was traded to the Rockets, but after I think it's on Wednesday he becomes free of all his waivers once he gets out of those.
Right, and he opted for that.
Exactly. So my thing is his numbers aren't impressive. He's come down from what the level he used to play at that we know Derek Fisher of with Kobe, but he was the guy that could keep Kobe under control in the locker room. Derek Fisher was, you could arguably say, other than Kobe Bryant, was the driving force of all those championships with just his presence. He's one of those impact players.
Yeah, he's a leader on the team.
Exactly. He's like, when you take the Heat and the Thunder are the two kind of front runners that everybody's thinking of right now. And if he goes to the Thunder, he'll be more of a mentor, I think, to Russell Westbrook. I don't know if he'll start. I don't think he will because of the chemistry.
Right.
But if you'll remember back in 2008 when the Celtics won the championship, what they did was they pulled a similar move to this by signing Sam Cassell, which ended up pulling in and helping, at the time, a very young Rajon Rondo to be able to lead that team on. Sam Cassell did play some minutes, which obviously were very important, but it was that presence and that guy that could say, Rajon, it's all right, calm down, play your game. So if he goes there, I think that's the role he'll play. But if I'm Derek Fisher and Miami's looking at me, you've got to go to Miami. Miami's already got 3 superstars that are playing. They need a true point guard to bump them to the next level, and they need a veteran who's been there before. Derek Fisher's got 5 rings, so he comes in and obviously is able to take over that locker room and motivate LeBron, Wade, and Bosh to finally get past this hump that everybody's been wanting them to get past and actually finally.
I liked your Sam Cassell history lesson right there. Obviously, that really did help Rondo in the year that they won the championship. Where do you see him going?
I think the point guard is the driving force behind your tempo. If they're not the driving force behind your team, they're the driving force behind your tempo. Miami's been playing a little more upbeat tempo. OKC gets up and down. So I do not think Derek Fisher is a good fit for either one of them. I think Derek Fisher would be a good fit at a kind of a slow it down team. I think he would be a little bit of good insurance for the Dallas Mavericks playing behind Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd doesn't get up and down either, and because you don't want to go from Russell Westbrook down to Derek Fisher. That's not a seamless transition when he comes off the bench. But Jason Kidd to Derek Fisher, while still a downgrade in most people's eyes, could be a seamless transition.
Yeah.
But because, to be honest, Derek Fisher's got so slow right now, like he would lose a foot race to a three-toed sloth. So I think the best fit for Derek Fisher, athletically wise, right now is the YMCA over 40 league.
Right. I agree with you. Obviously, you want to keep the tempo about the same.